All right, let's do the hype tier list. What we're doing here is this is not what I think is going to happen. What I think is going to happen has nothing to do with this tier list. Instead, what we're doing is what is the expectations of the fan base or of just the general public in general? How do people view this team? So the five tiers are Super Bowl or bust. So if you don't win the Super Bowl, it's a disappointment. We could maybe win the Super Bowl tier. Then there should be playoffs. We didn't have playoffs. Are you kidding me? Playoffs, which is the, you could make the playoffs. And then, well, there's always 2025. Those are the tiers. Let's just get into it. First, there is the Tennessee Titans who, you have Will Levis at the helm. I think there's a lot of just questions about the young quarterback who did show flashes his rookie year. They did make some real improvements, adding Calvin Ridley, getting a lot of secondary help, which could really work out. I think that I think they're in the playoffs question mark category. I don't think playoffs are a given by any means, but could it happen? Yeah, I could see it happening. The Dolphins are in the should be playoffs tier. I don't think there's a ton of Super Bowl hype the way there was in previous years because the playoffs did go so poorly and they have lost talent, but I still think they should be a playoff team. I think I'd be surprised if they weren't. I think the expectations are, yeah, we should be in the playoffs. Maybe the expectations could rise as the season goes along. The Jets, I think the Jets are in the hype is we could maybe win the Super Bowl, right? You have Aaron Rodgers coming back. They did a lot of stuff to help out that offensive line, to help out the offense in general, which really needed it. There still is some, we'll wait and see nature with them. They're not Super Bowl or bust necessarily, but that's the hype at this point. And for the Bengals, I kind of think they're in a similar boat just because Burrow coming off of an injury, they have obviously done a lot of really good things as of late. Nearly beat the Chiefs one year, did beat the Chiefs the other, only to lose in the Super Bowl. But I also think that they're a team that has lost some talent defensively, and that's kind of why maybe the hype is a little bit dwindled. So they're not quite Super Bowl or bust, but definitely in the we could maybe win the Super Bowl. You then have the Browns, who I think their hype is certainly should be playoffs because they made the playoffs last year with a lot of injuries, healthier now. That's where the hype is. I still think there's enough questions with, really the quarterback position to put them too much higher. But yeah, I think that's where the hype is. You then have the Jaguars, who, man, what a disappointment that was last year towards the end of it. But they did add a Brian Thomas Jr., who I think they're hoping could help. I think the hype is that they should be a playoff team. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think that's what the expectations are going in. Doesn't mean they will be a playoff team, but I think that's what their expectations are. I'd probably say the expectations should be maybe a tier below, but that's just me. Then there's the Lions, who I think they're in all the way. I think Super Bowl or bust. I think it's let's go. This is our year. The reality is, guys are going to start getting paid after this year. They'll still be competitive after this year for sure. But, when you talk about windows, it's probably the most open this year. This is maybe going to be their best shot unless they get another really good draft pick or something, which of course can happen because they've done that a lot recently. So definitely not like their window's closed, but this is a huge opportunity for them to win a Super Bowl. How can you not put them on that hype? I mean, they were so close last year. They've probably added more than any of the top contenders did. So we'll see what happens. The Vikings, I think the Vikings are in we could make the playoffs tier, right? New quarterback, of course, is gonna there's going to be some questions there, but you added a new edge rusher as well. They're in a rebuild phase, so you never know. But there's hope, for sure. There's hope. I think for the Buccaneers, I think the hype should be playoffs. As a fan, I actually don't know if playoffs are a guarantee by any means. There's some real secondary issues that are kind of getting overlooked. They did improve certain key aspects they needed to improve, but with the secondary concerns, I'm concerned. I just don't know if anyone's really saying, oh yeah, Super Bowl could be an option, but definitely I think the hype among Buccaneers fans I see is that they should be in the playoffs. The 49ers are another team that is, they're Super Bowl or bust. I mean, they were so close last year. It's unbelievable. The only team that's ever, you could argue there's never been a team that's been closer than the 49ers to win a Super Bowl that didn't. I guess maybe, I don't know. The Bills with missing a field goal at the end. I guess that would be closer. Falcons also went into overtime and lost. The Titans were a yard away from sending it to overtime. So it's been close, but long story short, they were very close to winning a Super Bowl, couldn't quite get it done. They want the Super Bowl this year, especially with Ayuk. Who knows how long he's going to play? They're in expectations are high in San Francisco. The Falcons were in playoff contention with bad quarterback play. They added Kirk Cousins, who should give them at the very least good quarterback play, is coming off an injury, but I do think that their expectations are like playoffs should happen, not just like hopefully make the playoffs. They're thinking they should make the playoffs. The Ravens, I'm trying to think. I don't know, actually. Do you think that they're in the Super Bowl or bust, or are they in the we could maybe win the Super Bowl? Weird how I ask you that as if you can answer me. That's not how this works. Kind of a one-sided conversation. But I don't know, because part of me is like, the expectations are so high. They were so good last year. They can just get over the hump. But I think that a lot of Ravens fans might say, but we said that in previous years too. And like, we did lose Odell, who wasn't great last year, but like haven't really had a great replacement there. Maybe I'm wrong. I think the hype might be here. I think that, we could win the Super Bowl. I think that there is a real chance they do win the Super Bowl. But I think they might also just have a bit more of a realistic expectation, given that this has happened before where they've looked awesome and then not had it work out. So I'm going to put them in that tier. We then have the Chicago Bears, who I maybe I'm wrong. I almost feel like they're in the should be playoffs. I don't know. I'll put them into, I think, maybe playoffs, but I think the expectations are high in Chicago. And despite the fact that they are coming off of back-to-back first overall picks, worth mentioning, they didn't earn it last year. They traded for a pick that ended up being the first overall. So with, didn't earn it as in, I'm just using that as an expression. I'm not saying they didn't deserve the first overall pick. As a whole, definitely a lot of firepower offensively. Still have some question marks defensively, but it looked good last year, especially once Sweat came over. So I don't know. I think the expectations are higher. I think I'm going to put them into, I think the Bears fans probably believe they'll be in the playoffs next year. Cowboys are always in the Super Bowl or bust here. It makes no sense to me. I don't agree with it. I disagree. I think every year it's like, okay, the Cowboys should be thinking like, yeah, we should be a playoff team. Probably not going to do a lot more than that. And then every year there's like people like, okay, here, will this be the year they win the Super Bowl? I'm like, no, it won't. It never is. But people always say this. Drives me nuts. But yeah, that's where the expectations always seemingly are. Then you have the Houston Texans. Maybe I'm crazy. I think the expectations are all the way up here. I think they're thinking like, could this be a Super Bowl team? We made a divisional round last year. We added Diggs. Like, our young players are getting older. Like, this could really happen. I don't think that's a crazy, hype. And I would say if everything hits, they could be a Super Bowl team. They would need everything to hit though. But yeah, definitely should be a playoff team. But for the hype, that's where I think they are. The Colts just narrowly missed the playoffs last year. I still think they're into like, hey, we could make the playoffs. It depends on how well Richardson plays right away, but that's where I think they're going to be. And then for the Rams, I think their hype is also should be playoffs. I think that's how Rams fans probably view themselves. They made the playoffs last year. I still think Rams fans like, well, we lost Aaron Donald, so don't know if we're going to go on a deep run, but enough offensive firepower. If we can finally get another healthy season of Cooper Kupp, should be a playoff team, I would say. Next up is the Chargers, who I think are going to be our first, well, there's always 2025 team. And I actually don't think it's out of the question that they can make the playoffs if the Jim Harbaugh turnaround works really well. Their offense gets better, and the defense can also get better right away. It's not out of the question. It really isn't, but it's not looking great, and even if they do end up one and done, I think Chargers fans have more hopes than just being in the playoffs. I think they're focused on a longer rebuild, I would assume. The Raiders, again, I don't think making the playoffs is out of the question either. I still think they're kind of in a similar thing of like, even if they make the playoffs, and go one and done, I think they're more focused on a more deep rebuild because of the quarterback situation. I could be wrong. I don't think the Raiders are like the worst team in the league. Got to be careful. Raiders fans are a feisty bunch. I want to make sure I'm not insulting you by saying this. I'm just saying the hype level, because again, that's what I'm measuring. The hype level feels a lot more measured this year. I think Raiders fans think it could be a fun year, but also it's more about building for the future. Washington, I think the hype is playoffs because, again, you have the young quarterback now. So, like, okay, could we make the playoffs this year? I don't think so. I think that the defense looks a little, well, I guess what I'll say is everyone on the defense regressed so much last year that, like, is it possible it was just coaching? Yeah, it is possible. And so could the defense get back to solid, and then could the offense be good with, I would say, some quality weapons, not an elite receiving core, but a quality one, have a young quarterback who I think should succeed right away. So, it's not impossible, but I'm not banking on it. Chiefs, I mean, yeah, they're going to be here as long as Mahomes is here. They're going to be in the Super Bowl or bust tier in terms of hype, and it should be that way. The Saints, I think the Saints feel like Derek Carr was struggling early on, played a lot better as the season went along. I think they feel like they should be a playoff team, which, just doing the math, I mean, a lot of teams are going to be in the should be playoff tier that realistically won't make the playoffs, and even 3 NFC South teams are there. But yeah, that's kind of, it might be a little tough, but who knows? I mean, hey, why not at least get excited if you're a fan of a team, right? The Giants, I don't know what where the Giants heads are at, really, because the past few years have just been so weird with them. With 2 years ago, basically every advanced stat known to man said that they stunk, but they still made the playoffs and won a playoff game. And then the Giants said, okay, great, let's pay Daniel Jones, we're good. And then they stunk the next year, and they're like, what happened? Well, maybe you just weren't that good 2 years ago. But again, are Giants fans thinking that way? I think Giants fans usually think my perception that is wrong. They actually were really good 2 years ago, and then last year was an anomaly. And so maybe they feel like playoffs are back on the table, and that's probably where I'm going to assume their hype is at as of right now. We then have the Eagles, who, I mean, listen, the Eagles love to turn on their own. I do wonder if they are in the... I'm in between should be playoffs or we could maybe win the Super Bowl. I actually think I'm going to put them here. They are only 2 years removed. They're getting, Matt Patricia is gone. They have a different defensive coordinator. I think they're hoping that with that, things could work out and they could get back to where they were 2 years ago. Maybe that's one tier above. I'm not sure. But that's where I think the hype is still. Like, you got to still feel at least like you have a shot at the Super Bowl if you were there 2 years ago. Unless you lost key pieces, which they kind of didn't. So, yeah, and they had a really good draft on top of it. So that feels fair for me. The Steelers should be playoffs. It's always should be playoffs. It always will be still should be playoffs. That could have put the should be playoffs in parentheses Steelers because, of course, they're going to be in this tier. Broncos, listen, I think Broncos fans are probably cautiously optimistic about the Bo Nix situation, but even with that, there's issues on this team. I think they're building for the future right now. The Packers, I think similar to the Texans, I think the hype is like, could we win it all? Like, we were pretty good last year. If our young players can take another leap forward the way they did last year, could it happen? I think it's a bit optimistic, but I love the optimism. So there you go. We then have the Panthers are next, who are another, there's always next year. There is hope that Bryce Young could take a step forward. That's really what you're hoping for. I think, again, even if he does, there's issues on this team besides just him. So then you have the Cardinals, who I still think, again, there's enough issues on this team. I'm going to put them on the there's always 2025 tier. I think that they're planning for the future. Similar to the Chargers and the Raiders, it's not out of the question that they could make the playoffs, but I don't think that if they do make the playoffs, I don't think they're going on a deep run, and they're still viewing things, for next year anyways. So that's how I view that with the hype there. The Bills, I think the hype has dwindled. They've lost a lot of players. Usually they're almost even in this tier. I think typically you would say, like, we can maybe win the Super Bowl. I think I'm still going to put them in that tier just because you have Josh Allen. And I think the hype is always going to at least be in this tier unless they look really rough around Josh Allen. I think the hype probably should be playoffs. And I'm sure a lot of Bills fans have that kind of hype of like, we'll make the playoffs and then hopefully we can just get hot at the right time. And we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with them. This Seahawks, I think the hype is probably in the playoffs question mark because they just had a near playoff team, wasn't quite able to get it. Year before, they just barely made the playoffs. So I think, if I'm a Seahawks fan at the very least, I'm probably expecting more of the same. And then finally, the Patriots, who, I can talk to Kyle, but I think probably is going to be another, well, hey, there's always 2025. So, yeah, that is my tier list of where I believe the hype is for each team. You have only 4 teams are in the Super Bowl or bust hype tier, and one of them is just the Cowboys, which is kind of a joke. I'm not even sure if Cowboys fans are really there, but it's honestly, I have to say this too about Cowboys fans. I should have said this in their segment. Every Cowboys fan I interact with on this channel tends to be pretty cool. Like, I don't really see the beef with like actual Cowboys fans. It's usually just like, like Skip Bayless and like the media members that tend to be obnoxious about it. But that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, interesting tier list. A lot of teams kind of all over, but yeah, I mean, I could just do the math real quick. I don't want to try to count live on stream. Currently, there are 20 teams that I put at least in the should be playoffs tier. And this is kind of the issue with like why it's hard to make predictions. Because I'm sure Saints fans, if I don't put them as a playoff team, will say, what do you mean you don't think we're a playoff team? Look at what we did last year. We just missed the playoffs by, a tiebreaker. And now look at how much better we should be this following year. And it's like, okay, sure. But you can make a similar argument like that for literally 20 teams. So like, only 14 can make it, and that's kind of the difficulty. And I still have another 6 that are into like a playoffs question mark tier. So like, and these teams aren't all going to be great, but some of them are. Like, will all 6 of these teams reach their potential? No. Will 2 of them? Probably. So like now there's 2 spots taken away. Like it's just it's difficult. But part of what's great about football is the way optimism can grow, is the way hype can grow. So that's part of the fun of it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.